Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ask Dr. Pickel show, where we help people find answers for their chronic health conditions, chronic health problems. So got a very exciting show today. I've had a lot of feedback already from people emailing and messaging and very interested in this topic. And so the topic for today is a neurotransmitter called GABA. And GABA, of course, relates to anxiety, panic, worry, sleep, a lot of things. And the reason why so many people are looking forward to hearing about this topic is because this is these are common symptoms. These are symptoms that a lot of people have and have definitely been elevated here lately with all of the coronavirus issues and so many issues going on that can cause increased stress and anxiety in people's lives. So we'll kind of take a deep dive into GABA and information about it and regarding it and what to do about it. So I think everybody will hopefully enjoy this. All right, so let's just dive right in. GABA, again, is a neurotransmitter. And neurotransmitters, basically, we have these in our brain, in our body. And these neurotransmitters, let's say at the brain level, that's our brain chemistry. It allows us to offset emotions. It allows us to be able to, let's say, think or have memory. This is how our brain cells communicate, is with these neurotransmitters. So they're pretty darn important for just daily life and functioning. And if there's a problem with them, then we start to get, of course, symptoms. Now, there's reasons for those problems. And a lot of people who have neurotransmitter issues that are affecting them, which we've talked about even in some past shows, let's say serotonin or dopamine, or like this with GABA, your conventional medicine is usually going to use medications, and we'll talk more about that too, to try to help with these issues. But what really can be done, and what's going on underneath, and can we actually deal with the cause of these types of issues? And that's what we're going to go over more today. Okay, so let's dive right in with GABA. Okay, all right, so let's start off. GABA, and what is GABA? GABA is gamma aminobutyric acid. You don't have to remember that, but it's a neurotransmitter. So what are the symptoms? What are the common symptoms that go along with GABA issues? If you're having a problem with GABA, first let's talk about GABA is what we call an inhibitory neurotransmitter. And so most neurotransmitters are what we call excitatory, meaning they stimulate nerve impulses. Let's put it that way. Whereas GABA inhibits nerve impulses. It kind of slows things down. So pretty darn important in our daily life, especially when so many things are coming at us day after day after day, and our cells are constantly stimulated. It's important that our cells react properly, but it's also important that we have some inhibition there to tone things down. So what happens if GABA is not working? Then we can start to get anxious. We can start to feel panic. So again, you shouldn't have. Now, when should you feel anxiety? Let's say you were going to go be a speaker somewhere, or somebody invited you to go speak somewhere. You were going to have to go get on a stage in front of a lot of people. Yeah, you'd be anxious. Anybody would be anxious. You're going to get anxiety symptoms, and that's okay. That's normal anxiety. If you're out in the wilderness and a bear is maybe going to chase you, anxiety can go up. There's situations where anxiety or panic are normal, but not in day-to-day life and not in typical things that most humans are doing. So know the difference there, because some people have had these issues their whole life. They don't know what normal is. And we see that happen all the time. All right. What else can I, and again, these can be for, like I said, anxiety or panic for really no reason. Um, Feelings of dread. Um, and this could be also in the research called feelings of impending doom, where it's like something bad's going to happen to me, to someone, something bad's going to happen no matter what. It just, that thought keeps going through the mind. The worst case scenario keeps going through your mind. And a person can end up thinking that way all day long. Everything they do, everything that comes about them, they think the worst. Not a good feeling to have, and not a good feeling to be around these type of people. So what else can happen there? Knots in stomach. And those of you who've had these types of issues know what that feels like. Feeling overwhelmed, and really for no reason. And also another one that fits into this too is feelings of guilt over just everyday decisions. It's like, I went out to eat. I feel so guilty. I emailed my friend, and I always at the end of the email say, "Oh, I'm so sorry for bugging you." You know, just feelings of guilt about everyday decisions. Let's qualify that. Okay. Would be another one here, restless mind. And this could also, we could call this difficulty turning mind off. So let's say you lay down to go to sleep at night, you're laying in bed, your husband or wife dozes off in about 5 seconds, they're sound asleep. You're laying in bed and your mind is going through everything you did that day, everything you need to do tomorrow. I mean, and it won't shut down. All the worst case scenarios, just so many things just popping into your mind, going through your head. You can't shut it down. You can't fall asleep. This is a problem. So this is, again, many times related to GABA. All right. And this could also be if you're trying to relax. It doesn't have to be when you're just going to sleep. You could say, hey, I'm a person who can never relax. I can never just go sit down, relax, and watch a movie. Go sit down and relax and just enjoy a day at the beach or at the lake or something like that. So again, this inability to relax, the brain is always kind of on, which isn't good. So let's even put that on here, inability to relax. All right. And then disorganized attention. Now, this can fit into other neurotransmitters too, but it's like, hey, I'm talking with this person and there's a person over here talking and suddenly I'm over there and over here and over there. It's, I can't really calm down and just focus. And that is disorganized attention. Worry, again, always thinking the worst, worried about every little thing. Inner tension, and I'll have many patients say this to me, inner trembling. They'll feel like they've had too much caffeine and their system's just like that a lot, even though they haven't drank any caffeine. Kind of that inner trembling, inner feeling of I'm wired, but I'm tired. Again, these are probably the main symptoms that we'll see with GABA issues. So take note of those. And if you have those, yeah, maybe you've got a GABA issue. So the thing is then we've got to say, hey, if we have these symptoms, if we have a GABA issue, what do we do about it? All right. So let's talk more about the mechanism. All right. So where is GABA made? Okay. Where is it made? It is actually made in a few places here. So, and one you probably already guessed is your brain or central nervous system. And really, a lot of your brain cells make GABA, so it's not really delineated to just some specific areas. Your brain cells actually make it, and we'll talk more about, from a neurotransmitter or amino acid called glutamate. So we're going to talk more about that too. But definitely, and then between the brain and the body, just like we've talked about with past neurotransmitters, we're going to write BBB here for blood-brain barrier. Everybody remembers that. That's the wall between our brain and our body, keeps bad stuff from our body getting up to our brain, or immune system cells from our body getting up into our brain. So important that blood-brain barrier is functional. We're going to talk about that more in a moment too. And then also, GABA is made in the body. And where is it made in the body? Actually, a couple of places. One place is your pancreatic islet cells. Now, what else is made in the islet cells of the pancreas? Everybody, whoever knows, raise your hand. This is insulin. All right. So insulin is made in these pancreatic islet cells, but also these cells make GABA. And GABA does a few things for the pancreas, especially as it relates to insulin regulation. It helps your cells to regulate insulin, and it actually protects and regulates these cells. So, and we'll talk about how that applies to diabetic type issues here in a moment, because that's kind of important. And another place GABA is made is in the kidneys. So kidneys are another source, and kidneys actually, GABA in the kidneys, interesting, in the research, they found that it's more that it's protective for the kidneys. Just like it's actually kind of protective for the pancreas cells, it's also protective for the kidneys. So we'll get into those and how that fits into the whole picture here in a minute. All right, so the next question is, how is it made? Because we need to have some puzzle pieces here so we can solve the mystery. All right, so what is the first thing that we need to make GABA? In fact, majority of neurotransmitters need this too in order to be formed. So the first thing is glucose. So blood sugar, you gotta have blood sugar, you gotta have glucose in order to start this whole manufacturing process. So again, we'll talk about how that fits into the picture soon, because that's an important, a big important factor in a lot of this. All right, and then glucose turns into this thing called pyruvate. And you don't really have to remember that too much, but it's just another step that we'll go through. And again, we'll kind of put these puzzle pieces together here in a minute. And then pyruvate turns into this thing called acetyl-CoA. And again, another thing that you really don't have to remember, but we'll talk about a little later. The important thing, though, is that acetyl-CoA fits into something called the citric acid cycle. Now, if you took high school biology, you might remember that, or you might remember it's called the Krebs cycle. And what is that all about? What happens there? So all of this is related to your mitochondria. And maybe you've heard of mitochondria. Mitochondria are these little, what they call organelles. They're like little organs within your cells. And mitochondria is where you make energy, what's called ATP. So mitochondria need to be functioning properly. And this citric acid cycle, this Krebs cycle, is part of this. Now, mitochondria fit into this, so we're going to talk about that more in a minute and how that fits in. But really the important thing is out of this citric acid cycle, there's a little offshoot that occurs as it spins its wheels and does its thing every day. And what that spits off is not only ATP. Oh, let me see if I can erase that. ATP, which is energy, like we talked about, but also another offshoot of this is called alpha. Really, we could use the symbol for alpha ketoglutarate. And maybe you've heard of alpha ketoglutarate, maybe you have not. Don't worry about it if you haven't, but that's what comes off of this citric acid cycle. Now, here's where it starts to get important. So we've got this alpha ketoglutarate now in our system, and that has to turn into an important amino acid, an important also neurotransmitter, which is called glutamate. Okay. And you've all heard of glutamate. Let's say you've heard of monosodium glutamate, which is in flavoring, maybe like in Chinese food, and which again isn't that good for you. And there's a reason. It's called an excitotoxin, and that's because it can trick the brain into thinking something tastes better than what it really does. But at the same time, it kills the brain cell too. So it's what we call excitotoxic. And excitotoxin, not glutamate, but monosodium glutamate, where they've taken that and overexcited. So, but this also tells us that glutamate is excitatory. It says to your cells, hey guys, get excited, start sending off signals, do this and that. Very important, very necessary. So we need that, but there has to be a balance. So this glutamate, then your brain cells can balance this, and they can turn that glutamate into, here we are, GABA. All right. So then we get the production of GABA. Now, then GABA has to go to the cell, and it affects the receptors. They're kind of like the doorways, the receptors on the cell. Okay? So the receptors are very important. And that's where it's like a ship coming into dock there. And so GABA can actually get into the cell. The doorway has to function properly too. Now, there's also a couple of essentials here that are important. In order to get from alpha ketoglutarate to glutamate, you have to have, actually you need the activated form of B6. It's called P5P. So this is a really important step. If you have a problem with activated B6, or you can't activate it, or you don't get enough in your diet, or you don't absorb it well, we'll kind of come back to those steps. That's going to be a problem. All right. And then this is actually an even more common problem, is this enzyme here that turns glutamate to GABA, and it is called GAD. The technical term is glutamate decarboxylase. And so this enzyme helps convert your glutamate to GABA. And so we need that enzyme to work properly in order to get to the next step. And then, of course, like I said, then we go over to where the receptors handle it from there. So here's the big question. Where now do the problems come in? Because now we've got kind of the picture laid out. Puzzle pieces are there. Which puzzle pieces can now be causing your problem? All right. So the first big one that can occur, and I see this across the board in so many people, blood sugar issues. A lot of people who have GABA issues have blood sugar issues. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. So the thing is what are blood sugar issues? Does it mean you have full-blown diabetes? No. You can have low blood sugar or hypoglycemia. You can have high blood sugar, or what's called insulin resistance or pre-diabetes, or you can have very high blood sugar, which is diabetes type 2 or We'll talk about diabetes type 1 here in a minute also. But anything that causes your blood sugar to fluctuate, go too high, too low, or a roller coaster will cause this. Now, to kind of take a side note on blood sugar issues, are blood sugar issues always due to what you eat or how much you eat? No, they can be. I mean, if you eat a bunch of sugar, yeah, you can create some problems for yourself in a lot of different ways. But if you're eating pretty decent, you can have a blood sugar issue because you don't absorb what you eat. If you have inflammation in your gut, this can equal a blood sugar issue because you won't absorb things as well, especially the important stuff, the proteins, the fatty acids, the minerals. Now, you will absorb the sugars and carbs real easily, but if you're mainly absorbing kindling, what does that do to your blood sugar? Roller coaster, because you burn it fast, it's gone, and then the body starts to have problems because it can't keep up with that. That engages a lot of your systems. It causes your pancreas to make surges of insulin. It causes your adrenals to work overtime. It puts more pressure on other organs and systems. So glucose, this blood sugar, I can't say enough about it. If that's not stable, then you might as well forget the rest because that can breed an anxiety issue. Now, another issue that can come in here is a mitochondrial issue. So these mitochondria, where you make energy, pretty darn important. And, what really affects these mitochondria? Let's kind of shoot this off to the side. Things that cause inflammation or oxidative stress. Now, we're going to have normal inflammation in our body, normal oxidative stress. We breathe oxygen. Our body's fighting stuff. There's a balance that occurs all day with our immune system, fighting stuff, keeping things in balance, and things that come into our system. And we have systems. We have natural antioxidants in our body. Things from our diet help, of course. Diet's higher in antioxidants, you do better. But things like glutathione in our body that we make, superoxide dismutase in our body that we make, these are things that naturally help us. So there's a balance that is kept. But if you have excessive inflammation in your body, excessive oxidative stress, that equals destruction in your body. That's like there's a fire in the house now, which is a problem. And there are many things that can generate this. Typically, those things are infections, heavy metals, toxic chemicals. And when I say toxic chemicals, that can be a wealth of things that you don't even think are toxic. I had a patient recently, she uses bleach everywhere. She uses it all through her house. She uses it with her clothes. She uses bleach everywhere. I mean, this is chlorine. Chlorine is pretty darn bad stuff. So again, it's a toxic chemical. We see many patients who have elevated levels of organophosphates, organochlorines. These are from herbicides and pesticides. They sometimes live in agricultural areas or near golf courses where they spray this really strong stuff. It floats in the wind even miles away and gets into their system. If you're not a good detoxifier genetically, this stuff gets stuck. Your immune system attacks it day after day after day. It can't win the battle, but it keeps inflammation going, which can cause all kinds of other negative effects. And inflammation can also be increased by chronic stress. Also, if you have I'll just write AI here, autoimmune condition, you're definitely more susceptible to these issues. So definitely some problems. Okay, so let's go back also. Well, in fact, another thing that can affect, we're talking about the mitochondria here. Another thing that can affect the mitochondria is if you're low in blood sugar. We talked about that. If you're low in oxygen, so what would cause that? An anemia. If you have any type of anemia, if you have iron deficiency anemia, if you have a macrocytic anemia such as B12, folate, B6 anemias, there's actually many types of anemias. If you have these types of anemias, yeah, this is going to compromise this whole process also. You're not going to be able to make GABA properly. So another puzzle piece here. And then also, if you have, well, let's kind of, I'm gonna come back to that because there's some other things that fall into this. But again, well, in fact, let's just add one more thing. I know, getting excited about all this. Okay, so another one is perfusion. And perfusion, we could also match that with blood pressure too. Let's say you have a low blood pressure. You're getting decreased perfusion, decreased oxygen to your body. So this is another way of lowering oxygen that can affect this. You got to have two types of fuel. You got to have blood sugar and you got to have oxygen. Without those two types of fuel, your body cannot function, and either one of them can create malfunction. Let's put it that way. All right, where else can this go wrong? If you have a deficiency in B6 or P5P, it's usually not that people aren't getting it enough. It's usually they're not absorbing it. But definitely, it's pretty, eat your veggies, and meats will have it too. All right. And then this is an interesting one. GAD. This is another place where it can go wrong. Glutamic acid decarboxylase is this enzyme that turns glutamate to GABA. So imagine if you're using glutamate, your body's using glutamate, which is excitatory, and it has to balance that with GABA, which is inhibitory and says, hey, tone it down, guys, turn down the volume. Well, if you have a lot of GABA, but not much, or excuse me, if you have a lot of glutamate, but not much GABA, the volume stays up all the time. Your cells are excitatory all the time. And if this GAD enzyme isn't working properly, this will cause this. One thing that can cause your GAD enzyme to not work properly is if you have a GAD SNP. That means a genetic issue with this, very common genetic issue. There's a blood test, GAD65. You're going to look to see if you have, GAD65 is actually going to be the autoimmune side. I'm sorry, there's two sides to this. There's the GAD autoimmune issue where your immune system is attacking this enzyme, which is actually more common than what you would think. And then there's also the genetic SNP for GAD, which means you've got a genetic issue affecting this. Both of these can totally be taken care of and dealt with. And you'd be amazed on some of the people who you deal with the autoimmune side or the genetic side, and they're like, wow, this has really made a significant change in life. So again, these two issues definitely exist. Now, where do they exist more? If you have this autoimmune issue for GAD, that ties into, I'm running out of space here, that ties into diabetes type 1. So diabetes type 1 is where your immune system attacks your pancreas. It's an autoimmune condition, so you got to take insulin because your pancreas can't make insulin. So if your immune system attacks your pancreas, that also decreases GABA levels there too, which are important. And then another thing that occurs, the other area that is really GABA sensitive is called your cerebellum. And this is the back of your brain, back of your upper brainstem in your brain. Basically, this is your balance and coordination area. Also, 90% of your sensory information that comes into the rest of your brain goes through there. It's kind of what I call the mini-me brain. It's pretty important, but it's especially known for balance and coordination. So let's say you say, hey, I'm insulin-dependent diabetic. I've got problems with balance and coordination, or even my coordination of speech or other types of coordination issues. And also, I'm anxious all the time. Yeah, you potentially have an issue with this GAD antibody. Or also, let's say you say, hey, my blood sugar's wreck. I'm always low blood sugar. I'm shaky. I'm irritable. I also have a ton of anxiety. Yeah, you've got a blood sugar issue affecting GAD. So these are potentials here with this and possible problems. Now, one other thing I want to add to this, and as we kind of get on to answers for this, is let's go back to this blood-brain barrier. I want to say something interesting about that, because some people will say, you know what, forget all this, I'll just take a supplement called GABA. You can do that. And in GABA, here's the thing though, is when you take GABA, and let's say a pill form, when it gets through your intestinal tract, into your body, into your bloodstream, GABA should not pass your blood-brain barrier. It should not be able to go through here. Yeah, your blood-brain, a healthy blood-brain barrier, that molecule is too big. So that tells us something. That tells us you have a leaky blood-brain barrier. There's another thing that we have to fix. So if you're like, hey, yeah, when I take GABA, I sleep really good, I feel super relaxed, it's just a miracle for me, great. But that tells us you not only have a GABA issue that we still got to find out the cause, but number two, you have a leaky blood-brain barrier on top of that we got to fix. So again, GABA when you take GABA, you should say, I don't notice anything. I didn't notice anything at all. So in fact, we can call that the GABA challenge. If you take GABA, you feel better. Blood-brain barrier is an issue. All right. So what can we do about all of this? So let's clear the page here, if it will let me. There we go. So meds. All right. I'm not saying this is the way, but this is conventionally the way, are medications called benzodiazepines. These are probably the most common. There are also non-benzodiazepines. We'll just call them non-benzos. And then there are barbiturates. And you can look up all these and see if your medication falls into any of these categories. But these are the main ways of trying to help out with anxiety. Now, what do these drugs do? They don't increase GABA production. No, not at all. None of them do that. What they do is they affect the receptor. Remember, on your cells, there's these little receptors, these areas where GABA docks on. So what they do is they affect the receptor, they change the receptor, they make the receptor more sensitive, hopefully, to GABA. So smaller amounts of GABA still equal a bigger effect, or kind of keep it in the gap longer, I guess you could say. So really, that's what all of these do. Again, they don't fix the cause of the problem. That whole series we just went through of all the potential ways something could go wrong, that's what we do here in practice. That's what we do in functional medicine, is we look through all those to say, where is the puzzle? What are the puzzle pieces here? And where's the problem? Where are the missing pieces or the problem pieces, so we can deal with those? Or otherwise, you just end up, because here's the thing with these meds, what's going to eventually happen with these is some of them are addictive, number one, which is very common. But also, even if they're addictive, it doesn't matter, because really, after a while, you'll get what's called resistance. And what does resistance mean? It means these receptors here start to say, no way, this is sensitizing us so much, we're getting in too much GABA into the cell. That's causing more problems in the body. Shut down the receptors. So it's like the body figures out the trick. It says, hey, you're trying to trick me with this medication. I know it. I figured you out. Shut down the receptors. So then your doctor's going to say, you know what? Let's up the dose. So they'll up the dose. Yeah, the receptors have to open back. The receptors get tricked again. They open back up. The door's open. Now more GABA can come in. Eventually, you'll get to a dose that the side effect list grows more than the help of the medication. So you can only go up to a certain doses that would be safe. Or the other thing that'll happen is the doctor's going to say, you know what, let's switch over to this other medication and try that. And then the other medication will have an effect from a different route to trick the cell. And now you're back to square one. But again, you've never dealt with the cause of the problem. So What are other ways of dealing with this? Well, and even these other ways can still not really deal with the cause. These are things that can help from a natural standpoint, but still, the thing I want to emphasize in here is, what do you do? Go to those puzzle pieces and figure out which one is wrong, where the problems are at, and deal with those particular issues. If you don't deal with those causes, you'll never get there. You can't just add in Band-Aids everywhere all the time, because they will stop working. But at the same time, if you're feeling lousy all the time, and you can't get help right away, use some Band-Aids. I don't blame you. And so some supplements that can help. And again, anytime I say supplements or medications, do speak to your doctor. We don't want any interactions or negative effects of anything. And whether it be medications or supplements, you can always get potential effects. So especially when it comes to like herbs and botanicals. So, okay. So one thing that fits into this is a supplement called L-theanine. And L-theanine is an amino acid. They get it out of tea leaves. And L-theanine basically increases GABA, increases serotonin, and increases dopamine in the brain. So it does quite a few different things. And it increases what are called the alpha brain waves. So alpha brain waves, these are the brain waves that kind of help make you feel relaxed. Be able to sit back and just kind of relax. Now, I like L-theanine, and it does help to with GABA issues many times, but I find that it makes people tired and that they want to sleep. So if sleep is an issue, then L-theanine can sometimes help, during that falling asleep and staying asleep time. Sometimes it will help, but again, doesn't deal with cause. Another one is L-taurine, another amino acid here. Actually, taurine is a very abundant amino acid in our brain. We need it. So taurine's kind of interesting. Now, what does it do? It kind of acts like the medications. It activates the receptors. It makes those receptors more sensitive to GABA. So it can help just like the medications can. In fact, if you look for sources of taurine, it's interesting. If you look at your energy drinks on their ingredient list, you'll see taurine on almost all of them. They know this. They know that these high doses of caffeine can make people feel anxious and jittery and things like that. So they're like, okay, let's try to balance that with adding some taurine in to kind of give a little bit less of a jittery effect or over caffeinated effect. So taurine's an interesting one. And I do find that taurine tends to help without making people feel tired. So that is oftentimes one that can be used. And another thing that people use commonly for, well, here, I'll write it out, magnesium. Magnesium can also be used for anxiety. And magnesium, also very important. I mean, our body needs magnesium for a lot of different things, pretty darn important for so many things. So you want to make sure you've got plenty in your system. But magnesium does kind of the same thing. It helps to affect that GABA receptor, just like medications. So GABA, so you're more sensitive to the GABA that you do have. Even if it's low, you're more sensitive to it. All right. What's another common one that you'll hear about? Valerian root, which again does the exact same thing, sensitizes the receptor. Now, this is an herb or a botanical. Some people drink valerian root tea or take valerian root capsules. And another one you'll hear about commonly on the herbal side is chamomile. Maybe you've seen sleepy time tea, chamomile tea. Chamomile has something in it called apigenin, and this also does the same thing. It affects the GABA receptor. So all these kind of work like the medication. If you're like, hey, I only get anxious when I do this or that, maybe take something like this to help offset some of that anxiety until you can figure out the cause of the problem. Because the biggest thing out of all of this really can come down to figuring out the cause. Things such as diet, blood sugar, inflammation, finding out what's causing the inflammation in your body. If you don't get rid of the destructive process that's going on in your body, you'll never get there. And you may have something that goes away temporarily and then comes back because the fire is still burning in the house. And then anemias, deficiencies, and that could be like your B6, magnesium, some of these other things that you need. The list goes on and on. But again, I guess my main focus that I'm trying to really get to you is dealing with the cause. So I hope everybody understands GABA and what can be done about it. And, there was a question that was sent to me earlier about somebody maybe wants to help their husband to get off of synthetic medications or maybe go a more natural route to get rid of anxiety or help anxiety or other issues that relate to GABA. Absolutely. The thing is again, you can try some of these things, but dealing with the cause and, you got to find out what's underneath there or you never really get there. Absolutely can be changed though in so many ways. But again, I feel like you got to do it correctly. So you actually get a result. Otherwise, a person might say, oh, that didn't work for me and just kind of go on their way because the cause was never dealt with and the wrong supplement was taken or given. And I hate for you to spend $1,000 on supplements that just don't work when the cause was something easy. So, all right, well, I hope everybody enjoyed today's video. I hope that gave you more answers as far as GABA and potentials there to look at. All right, everybody, if you get a chance, do give us the thumbs up or all the good stuff on Facebook and YouTube, and do share us. We've got a lot of feedback from people that have shared. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your question, Courtney, and all you who are watching. I think those were the main things today. God bless everybody, and I will talk to you soon.